What is the best display of wealth you've ever seen? When I was 1 year old, our house burned to the ground. I was the youngest of 4 children at the time. I have a little brother now. We lost everything, including the car. My father spent months in the burn unit with less than a 33% chance of survival. Miraculously, he recovered. A fellow church member friend bought us a brand new car and left a stack of cash in the glove box to help us get back on our feet. My father promised to repay him after he got a job. At the time of the fire, he was in a PhD program, which he subsequently dropped out of. The man refused to let my father pay him back and simply said, "Someday, you will have the chance to do this for someone else." Fast forward a decade and my father had a great job. We lived in a nice home, had multiple cars and everything else we needed. At our church meeting, it was announced that money was being raised to purchase a specialized van for a paralyzed man. After the meeting and in private, my father asked how much was needed to buy the van. He proceeded to write a check to cover the remaining cost. Sadly, our fellow church member who had done such a wonderful deed to us had passed away and was not around to hear that his words to my father had come true. I went to a friend's wedding once. It was held at the home of his fiance's friend, a dot-com billionaire who got out before the tech bubble burst. Multi-million-dollar house in a gated community. Famous people as neighbors. 100 wedding guests had dinner on his patio. I was talking to the groom around sundown, and there was this worker going through and cleaning the tables like a pro. I mean, every glass and bottle was swept up swiftly and efficiently. I said, "Wow, that guy's really good," and my friend said, "Yeah, he's the owner. A billionaire was cleaning up after us." My grandfather was a landscaper for one of the wealthiest families in his town. All along the years they were always very generous, giving him large Christmas bonuses and extra money during the year for reasons like they lived the rich hue of the roses that year. At age 86, I know, Grandpa saw a doctor for the first time and was told he had to stop working. All the bending over caused eye problems. The family continued to pay him his weekly salary and maintained his health insurance until he died. At 100, they then sent $20,000 to the funeral home to defray some of the costs. Mom and I would occasionally go up there when he was working, and if she was home, the matriarch would come out and sit with us and have us served iced tea with mint and the most delicious cookies. Just really nice folks. Edited to add, holy cow, I didn't expect so many people to respond. Second edit. When you bend over for extended periods, hours each day for decades, pressure begins to build in your brain, in his case behind the optic nerve. This could lead to blindness. I knew this rich Arab guy, a prince in the literal sense. He wasn't a D. He never flaunted his wealth, just a normal guy. After about a year of knowing him, he was in my friend circle. We were pretty close friends. Out of nowhere, he invites us all to France. An all-inclusive trip where we stayed in a 5-star hotel, explored Paris, and went on a road trip to nearly every other place in France we could reasonably go to in 2 weeks. Nobody but him paid a single franc. He bought us first-class tickets, wouldn't let us pay at all the fancy-ass restaurants we went to. Best vacation I've ever gone in my life. George Lucas is going to spend over $100 million to build affordable housing in an effort to piss off his neighbors who blocked him from building a studio. I worked on a children's cancer unit, and every year we had a 2-week children's cancer survivor camp. There were usually 30-40 kids each year. They kids had it done up right. They had an ice cream machine in each of the dorm rooms, a trip to Disney, staying at the $500 plus night Disney hotels, park tickets, pocket money to spend in the parks. They chartered a yacht for a day of fishing and cruising on the ocean. Swim with the dolphins day. The girls got makeovers. The boys and girls got game systems. Fine dining at a posh restaurant on South Beach with limo rides. Shopping spree at a swanky mall. Pretty much anything they wanted was at least seriously considered and usually granted. Most of these kids were from middle class and poor families and no way would have ever been able to afford that. As a nurse, I got to go on some of those trips to manage their meds, and it was amazing. It was just the surviving kids. No families. No siblings. It was all 100% about only them. All of this paid for each year by one check from one awesome, anonymous donor. When my cousin had cancer, She made friends with the girl she shared a room with in the hospital, who was dying and had no living relatives. Her friend was going to have to transfer to the East Hospital in our area because she had run out of money. My millionaire uncle found out about this when he was visiting my cousin, and paid her friend's medical bills through on the spot in 2 phone calls. Then he gave her his number to make sure she called the next time her bills were due. My dad inherited about $250,000 in 1950. That was a lot of money then. Because he had no need for money, he drove a bus. One day a black man came on the bus, claiming he couldn't get loan on a house because as soon as the banks found out he was black, he was turned down. My dad called the banks, asked for loans, and then told them he was black, and was turned down at once. Over the phone, my dad loaned the man $10,000 to buy a house, interest free. That I've ever witnessed in person. I was a chef in a fancy boutique hotel here in New Zealand and we used to get the famous and wealthy staying with us. Cliff Richard, Serge Tankian, Nancy Cartwright are a few guests that I was lucky enough to meet. However, the wealth thing, we had a sheikh of an oil country. Well, I'm assumed he was a sheikh, or just an Arabian dude rocking the flowing robes and hat. Came over to the pass and complimented us on the meal and asked how many staff in the kitchen, including kitchen hands and wait staff. It was something like 12 or 13. The guy just peels off that amount of hundy notes and gives everyone a $100 tip. Pretty cool and nothing as obnoxious as gold Ferraris or anything. Guy I know went to his friend's house, and he saw a horse on the property. He asked what the horse's name was, and his friend didn't know. You gotta own a lot of stuff to have a horse that doesn't have a name. A friend of mine had a very wealthy uncle. He passed recently, that went back to the very poor city he was raised in Bangladesh and funded and built a library for the people there. That has always been such a cool story. Me, edit, Bangladesh. You mean like giving gold to it posts? JK, Rowling went from billionaire to millionaire in 2012 due to donating to charity and paying taxes. I was lucky enough to attend a very nice private school that taught kids from JK, junior kindergarten, through 12th grade with tuition about $20k per year. A classmate of mine's family, after having paid the way for their 4 kids to go through all 13 grades, also paid full tuition every year for their housekeeper's 5 children to go through the same school. This was before I was born, but the cost of setting up my father's business was apparently paid for by a wealthy older woman who simply gifted him the hundreds of thousands of dollars he needed. Apparently she also told him she would back him if it took a while to get things moving business-wise, which fortunately it didn't. The woman paid for a lease on a very impressive space smack in the middle of the most expensive area of downtown Chicago, furnished the entire place, sent him several paintings from a prominent artist that she had commissioned specifically for him. Sotheby's apparently values them at about $75k at auction each, and on top of all that remained a paying client of the business until the day she died. She was one of the few genuinely happy rich people I've ever met. On a side note, she also taught me some Yiddish. Great lady. When a Brazilian billionaire announced he wanted to bury his $1 million Bentley, saying he wanted to drive in his afterlife but actually had a plot twist of a nice message to everyone, it created a lot of buzz as expected, with plenty of criticism on his show of wealth. And then at the actual ceremony he said this: "People condemn me because I wanted to bury a $1 million Bentley. In fact, most people bury something a lot more valuable than my car." Scarpa said during a speech at the ceremony. They bury hearts, livers, lungs, eyes, kidneys. This is absurd. So many people waiting for a transplant and you will bury your healthy organs that will save so many lives. When I was a kid, my parents both worked 2 jobs to help our family. My dad had one job, a factory, making molds for big factory parts during the day. Then at night he worked as a valet for a pretty good restaurant in downtown Chicago. One night, they had a pretty well-known football player in the restaurant. I forgot who it was and would need to ask my dad. Anyway, at the end of the night he was trying to catch a cab in front of the restaurant, so my dad ran to the end of the block, which was a busier intersection, and got him a cab. He thanked my dad and tried to slip a bill in his hand, but my dad declined and said it was okay. He insisted and got into the cab, said thanks again and went off. It wasn't until after he left that my dad noticed he gave a $100 bill just for hailing a cab. That was a huge help to us at the time and something that we greatly appreciated. I once gilded Bill Gates. Full stop. Reddit Gold costs $4 a month. Bill Gates with 6% interest on his 82.8 BN makes about $414 million per month. Which means he can gild the 14 million Redditors in a month and still have $400 million earned in that month. For TD, that's one Trump per 9 months. Full stop. Edit. Underestimated Bill Gates earnings. Dolly Parton giving $1,000 a month to homeless victims of the TN fires. My dad and I saw a woman at the store get into a fight with her husband. He ended up taking the car and leaving her there with the kids at the store. My dad paid for her groceries and offered her a ride. When we dropped her off, my dad gave her all of the money in his wallet and told her that she doesn't deserve to be treated like that. When I asked my dad a few years later, my mid-teens, how much he gave her, he said it didn't matter. A wallet worth of cash. I tried to argue that can be a lot of money or a little money, and my dad told me that you should never have enough money in your wallet to worry. My dad was a real penny pincher and a sound investor. You'd never know what kind of money he squirreled away, but he gave a stranger all of his cash because that money wasn't enough to change his life, but it altered hers. TLDR. My cheap father gave a woman all of the cash out of his wallet and nobody saw him give anyone another dollar for 20 something years. When he stuffed a dollar in my tuxedo during an impromptu money dance at my wedding. My sister bought me McDonald's once. My dad's boss has had Obama over to visit twice during his time in office. The guy actually lives a pretty non-glamorous lifestyle. He dumps most of his money into employee parties, events and into some Alaska wildlife preservation thing. But I think paying for the president to come over is pretty rad. Nobody will see this, I'm sure, but once I was playing a gig at a really nice hotel. I'm a musician and had gotten a $200 speeding ticket on the way. It was my first one ever and I was pretty sad about it. This couple had been listening really intently for an hour and then called me over to their table and just asked me about my day and we talked. And I said something about the ticket. Before they left, the guy put $200 in my tip jar. Great night. I worked briefly as a shipping clerk for a company that tested airplane parts. The pay was okay, but the fringe benefits of working for Bob, the owner, were through the roof. Every October, he put up the entire company, with a guest each, in hotel rooms at the nearby casino. He organized a company dinner, with an open bar, a carving station, all sorts of amazing food, the works. After dinner, he handed each and every employee a new $100 bill to hit the tables or drink all night or whatever. Bob was the most well-loved boss I've ever known of. Everyone respected him, and he showed respect and appreciation to every one of his workers. On Fridays he would personally walk the entire facility and give everyone a paycheck and a handshake. The fact that he would throw $100,000 down on a party for us every year was just gravy. He was a great guy to work for. Unfortunately I was a teenager and didn't keep up with the work the way I should have, so they let me go. But I think about reapplying there from time to time, now that I've learned how to bust my ass like a man. Bob is the real deal. I have two from my time in ultra high net worth wealth management. 1. A family worth $865 million drove 5-year-old Toyotas, lived in a normal house and thought Red Lobster was a fancy dinner. I will never forget their 10-year-old daughter whispering about how expensive a Red Lobster menu was, and asking if she could order whatever she liked. That little girl has a $200 million trust fund. 2. A young woman who inherited roughly $220 million uses her monthly $750,000 allowance to operate an animal shelter. All kinds of animals have huge open spaces to play with each other and other kinds of animals if they are hardly enough. They have medical care and great food, everything they need. The place is literally like a dream. She invites all the local schools to bring their kids to play and receive education on the animals. All of this entirely on her dime. Both stories are awesome for different reasons. Bill Gates is doing a hell of a job trying to get rid of a bunch of diseases worldwide. My millionaire grandma was paying for college for all her grandkids. I started failing. So she started paying for a local student to go instead of me. She was an old southern white lady, and according to my parents the local student was black. If that matters. No resentment at all on my part. It made me take my education seriously, and I ended up with a PhD from a great institution. Don't know what happened to the local kid, but I hope it helped him too. I was working for a pretty big company in the 2/3 RD level support. One day we were discussing a new problem we recently discovered and started to debug the code, and there is this guy that showed up from time to time. That just came in and tried to help us whenever he could. I was working there for around a year and I knew him by name, but quickly realized that he was really f***ing smart and knew a lot about the devices and software we sold. He drove a 1990s BMW and always wore jeans plus shirt. Turns out he is the co-founder of the company and multiple millionaire heavy. He stepped out of the company and only works for fun. A party hat set on RuneScape. This story may not apply here, but it's still a good story. I work with a guy who comes from money. Like, I vacation at my family's island sort of money. He only works there because his dad told him he needed to get a job and learn life skills. He has a "I seriously don't need this job" sort of demeanor, and I really kind of hated him for the first year he worked there. Anyway, every couple of months a few of the people I work with do these volunteer events. It's always different. Going to the hospital to read to sick kids. Making breakfast for injured vets. That sort of thing. I never went to one until a friend from work encouraged me to do so. Come to find out the kid made of money goes to every single one. And not only goes, is really energetic and excited about it. I was doing the heating service at a customer's house. It was a nice sized house. There was a furnace in the garage that heated the room above. I walked into the garage and there were thousands of wrapped gifts sitting in neat little stacks on skids all over. I guess the homeowner saw the look of astonishment on my face. They go to discount stores and will buy toys and housewares and give them to needy people for Christmas. The skids all were labeled who the gift was for. Girl age 1-3, boy age 5-7, adult. Things like that. They do it all on their own. I was in a diner down south when the owner basically rushed this lesbian black couple through their meal and hurried them out. I'm not sure if it was physics or their race, but I found it pretty disgusting. Some quiet white guy at the back of the diner near me just quietly pulls out his mobile and calls his secretary, telling her to ruin the diner on blah 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 street, no matter what it costs. I was pissing myself with giggles and it was all boarded up when I passed back by 2 weeks later.